glad to be able to present this as a ministry of Ecclesia. Ecclesia is a relational network that is dedicated to partnering with, equipping, and multiplying missional church communities. It's been a while since we've had the podcast, and we're really happy to see it started up again. My name is Bob Hyatt. I'm the Director of Equipping and Spiritual Formation for the Ecclesia Network, and Dustin Bagby is going to be co-hosting this with me. Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Dustin Bagby. I'm one of the pastors at the Evergreen community in Portland, Oregon. And that's about it.
And that's it. That's all you got.
Dustin, are you not the director of anything? No? That's fine too.
All right, Jim, you're not supposed to be talking yet. Our guest today on this inaugural Ecclesia Podcast 2.0 is Jim Pace. Jim Pace has been in ministry for 44 years. He's an amazing guy. He's getting ready to retire, and I understand that there is a collection of seashells in his future. Mm-hmm. So, Jim, where are you and what are you doing? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, here in Blacksburg, Virginia, right at Virginia Tech, and yeah, I'm one of the pastors of New Life Christian Fellowship. Have been in ministry for a while, not quite the 40-some years, but I think like 23 or something. So it's getting to be a while there, and yeah, just glad to be here.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about your journey into ministry? I'd love to hear how 60 years ago you heard the call, mm-hmm. answered it. Tell us the whole pastoring thing. How did that come about for you?
Oh, well, my friends and I were doing some cave painting. We were trying to get elk just right, and it was very, very difficult. I'll be honest, I never got it, but it was just after that. But no, I did my undergrad at Virginia Tech and was very, very much not a follower of Jesus, vigorously not so. And I was around my junior year, through a whole host of events, I started just kind of researching out religion, quite honestly, and discovered, much to, at the time, my chagrin, that I couldn't just kind of push the Bible away in the way that I had kind of, just that kind of the cultural mythology about the Bible. It couldn't push it away. I became a follower of Jesus and was going to do, my plan was to do a PhD in child clinical psychology. That was the path I was on. That's what I wanted to do. I was excited about it. And then right after I graduated Tech, I went on a missions trip to Ukraine. It was the first missions trip I'd ever been on. I'd only been a follower of Jesus maybe a year at that point. And it was on that trip that God said, I want you to do ministry. And I would love to say that I just said, thou art, wise, O Lord, I shalt do. But I argued with God for 6 months, trying to get out of it. And eventually I kind of just relented. I thought, well, I can't beat you on this, God. Seems like you're making me. I felt like it was one of those times where I knew, I've got friends that have been called into ministry, and it just seems like a wise decision, and it wasn't quite so specific. This was one I felt like God was saying, either do it or don't do it, but what I'm directing you to do. And so I decided I would. I'd been involved with the church I'm actually pastoring now for a year before I graduated, and called up J.R. Woodward, who was the pastor there at the time, and said, hey, you thinking about doing this thing? And he was interested, and I came, and here we are.
Jim, when I heard you mention Ukraine, I couldn't help but think of the scene in Seinfeld where they're on the subway and Kramer has the risk board so that he can't cheat, him and Newman. Yeah. And he mentions that the Ukraine is weak. And there's someone from Ukraine standing right next to him who says, Ukraine is not weak, Ukraine is strong. And then he smashes the risk board. So all of that made me wonder, what's your favorite Seinfeld episode?
You know, how does one choose one's favorite child? How does one choose one's favorite minor prophet? You know, I got to say, I mean, this is probably, I don't know, we'll see if this gets edited out, but honestly, the contest is probably my just in terms of sheer, I remember when I watched it, I was like, this is so irreverent and different from, it was funny. So the contest.
Yeah.
Now, for those that don't know, the contest episode is where the main characters in Seinfeld have a contest, and the point of the contest is to see who can go the longest without. Is there a good euphemism we can use here?
I think masturbating, right? Is that the euphemism that we're looking for?
No. Is that too direct?
Is that? But I mean, is that, you know, euphemistic enough?
Without self-abuse would be the old school. Oh, wow. We are off to a great start here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to turn this back toward ministry, since I derailed it with the Seinfeld question already, probably a question that will come up often in this podcast. But Jim, how many years have you been doing ministry?
23 now.
23 years.
Mm-hmm.
As you think about that initial call that you felt to ministry, and then, you know, 23 years later, are there things, or I'm sure there are multiple things, but maybe what has been along the way the biggest surprise for you in ministry, from what you thought it was going to be compared to just things that have come up that you never expected to have to deal with, or that were more challenging than you thought ministry would be? What are some of those surprises in ministry along the way for you?
No, I'd have to say I thought I saw it exactly accurately, just right from the get-go. It was no surprises. Just played out exactly like I thought. No, I think that I love that quote. I don't know who said it. I know I didn't. But it said that, you know, as I get older, I believe fewer things more deeply. When I first came into ministry, everything was clear. I knew how it was all going to play out, just because I just knew, you know. I mean, I've described this before, but when we talk about, you know, raising our kids and having brought 3 kids through adolescence, you know, I describe adolescence as all clarity with no perspective. And I think that's how the first part of ministry was for me. It was all clear. There's just no perspective to go with it. And so I guess I was surprised that, I guess one of the things I thought is, if you're doing the right thing, it will kind of, the road will kind of lay out in front of you a little more clearly than it sometimes does. Or that at least you'll always be really clear what the right thing is. You know, I had, you know, read the Bible. I was familiar. You know, I'd heard of it, but, you know, and you think of those times where in Acts where, you know, Paul is dealing with the Council of Jerusalem, and they're talking about them. You know, what are the requirements for someone that's a follower of Jesus? And where he says, it seems good to the Holy Spirit and to us, this huge moment in the church, and it seems good. It's not, that'd be a time, I think, Paul, if he could have stated with clarity, this is exactly what you need to do with great clarity. This is not us, this is the Lord. It seemed good. Things like that kind of started leaping out, or reading Acts and the rest of it, just seeing how the church was so chaotic and confused. I'd read that stuff, but it never really landed until I started seeing, it's not quite as straightforward as I thought. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. It just seemed like you're doing the right thing for the right reasons and the right way, that there's very clearly a model that will work all the time. You're doing all that, it'll be fairly smooth, because it's what God wants. So I think that was it took me a while to kind of wrestle with the lack of that, or at least it isn't always as smooth as we would think it should be.
I actually want to circle back a little bit, because I don't think we've quite mined the topic that we were kind of looking at. I'm wondering, you know, to follow up on Dustin's question, Have you ever had to reference the contest episode in ministry? I mean, you work with college students, right? You're working.
A lot of people that I work with are college students, yes.
18 to 22-year-old males. Is that a talk that you've had to have with some young guys?
Never really comes up. I don't know. It seems like no one really is.
Nobody wants to talk about it?
It's irrelevant. No, it's something, we talk about. Yeah, I mean, I think those are topics that, and certainly beyond the 22, 23 range, it still remains an issue. Yeah. That's how you navigate your sexuality without either going the cultural direction of saying whatever I imagine or perceive to be the way that I want to express it is fine, or you go the way that, the more conservative church, that it's almost something that shouldn't be discussed, the one whose name shouldn't be said kind of thing. You obviously, you see those are the two edges. But trying to figure out a way that you can be healthy about looking at the way that we are wired, and also look at the way that the Spirit is calling us to walk within it. So yeah, these are things that come up a lot: relationship stuff, all that stuff. That's not a typical conversation fodder, we'll say.
Yeah. I remember when I was in high school, my the guy who was discipling me, the words of wisdom he gave me were, Bob, greater is he that is in you than he that is in your pants. That is really just stuck with me all these years.
Yeah.
I have found myself repeating that to young men in the 18 to 22 year range numerous times over the years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it really is. I mean, there's this, we are at our base. We're a post-enlightenment culture that just would say that whatever you're feeling like is, and it's not completely fair, but generally speaking, that the way that you choose to self-express is right. And so at any point, if that is denied, then who you are is denied. So, I mean, it's not just the physical urge. It's like you're taking the very self of a person and ratcheting it down a notch if you suggest that the Spirit has a way that our sexuality is to be navigated. And that's a tricky thing.
It is. Have you, in the years that you've been working with college students, has it changed? Or the years that you've been pastoring, have you noticed that ministry is different now than it was then, that the people you're working with now are different or more challenging in some way?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, things have definitely changed. Even in this one location over the last 10 years. I think there's, when I first came on staff in the late 1780s, I think it was different. It was like there was a general ambient sense that probably God was real. Probably it's not a bad thing to go to church. At least it's kind of this thing. Like, I always picture that scene from Titanic, where there's a I don't know if he's a priest or who he is. He's a religious dude, and he is like, as the boat is breaking up and going down, he's telling people, come to Jesus, and they're coming. And we ran into this after the shootings here at Tech. There was this sense among some. In fact, I was being interviewed by a guy who very, very clearly had that sense that when bad things happen, it reminds you of what's true, which that is true. I think the thing that's happened in the last 10 years is what's true has changed dramatically. And so that changes how ministry's done. There's much less of a sense. I think Christianity to the average college student, and again, this is going to be so unfairly broad, but not intentionally so, I guess. To the average college student, it really has become, it's cultural myth. It's like people that churn their own butter, or make their clothes. It's like, you can do that. understand why you would. I mean, there's much better ways that you can navigate life without having to do that. It just feels like a relic, and maybe some people haven't quite caught on yet. And then among the stronger voices, it's a tremendously unhelpful myth. It's like it's not that much different from cultures that used to sacrifice children. It's like that. It's dangerous.
So how have you had to change your style of ministry or the way that you pastor in response to that?
I mean, I think what has happened, and this is probably something we needed to do anyway. We've historically, I mean, if you just want to get a ton of people in a room and get them excited, that's not that difficult to do. There's certain things you do, certain things you don't do, and you can get a big crowd and all that. And there are a lot of churches that have big crowds and they do great things with it. And so again, I'm not trying to make statements that are broader than what we found was that we had to actually get lower to the ground. I think in a climate where people would, when they hear that you're a follower of Jesus, they look at you very similarly to if they find out that you're a CrossFitter and you want to talk to them about it. They just kind of back up. It's like, I don't want to get into all this with you right now. What has to happen is that has to be done much more relationally. And so what we found is we had to really shift our focus from this larger Sunday event-ish kind of thing to the bulk of the work is done in small groups and with clusters. And those clusters had to be places where they could be both meaningful to help people really get grip in their faith and grow in their faith, but they also had to be accessible for their friends who were curious maybe a little bit about it, or just tired of a friend inviting them and just coming just to get them to stop. And so it had to have that accessibility, but it also had to have depth. And that seems like it would be very straightforward in doing that well. It took us a while to figure that out. So yeah, it had to become much more relational. They need to actually see that you're a reasonable person. It's funny, because CrossFit sees this. Because there is this kind of weird, perception, they don't try to fix the perception. What they do is they just offer you to come with a friend free for a week. And then what happens is people stay. And there's something to that. It's not trying to fix every possible cultural misunderstanding, which is the way some apologetics is done. It's the way that some things are done. It's just come in with us and let's look at Jesus and then tell me what you think of the guy. So anyway,
Jim, you were a CrossFit guy for a while, right?
I was. That's where I learned how. Yeah, I was.
Well, I remember you talking about that. I think it was at the Ecclesia gathering, whenever the last one was 2-3 years ago, about some of the different language and just some of the things that you learned that you felt like were good models or ideas for the church. Is there another one of those things from CrossFit that stuck out to you that you still think about in terms of how you do ministry?
Oh yeah. I mean, I learned a lot about building community from the way they do it. I mean, the thing that I saw, and these are things that I would say we were doing, but I don't think we did them the way that they were. The first time you come in, they learn your name, they use your name, they include you in, you are a part of the community. And they almost can will you into that. Like you're just put on the groups. Your picture is, I mean, that's one of the things that drove me crazy is they'd constantly be taking your picture and tagging you on social media. And so you're almost kind of brought into this alignment with them. And they're so excited about it. You can get excited too. I mean, I never did the keto diet and I never, I didn't go all the way in. But I found that they were extremely interested in me, not just me to join them or not just me to achieve whatever goal they had, but me and what I wanted to see happen. And I think there's a lot of churches that I would say absolutely, if they were honest, could not say that. And so I think there was something to that. I talked with some of the people that lead it, and they go through whenever they have new people. something sent out to all the leaders with the name and the picture and the face and all the, it's just like, this is who this person is. So even if you haven't met them, when you walk in, they know you. So it's like, that's kind of cool. So yeah, with all the things that can go with the CrossFit culture, there were some very cool things that I learned about community, I think, through there.
One other CrossFit note, this last Saturday, I was running, and as I was finishing up my run, a woman came flying around the corner and passed me holding a giant medicine ball.
Yep.
Which was humbling, obviously,
Sure.
as I'm not carrying a medicine ball.
No.
But I had to assume that's a CrossFit thing, right?
That's a CrossFit thing.
Okay.
Functional fitness. So that if you ever are in a race where you need to carry a medicine ball, you're ready to do it.
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, Jim, this is the part in the podcast where we like to stop and ask our guest just a really important question pertaining to ministry. Here's what we want to know from you. What is the alcoholic beverage of choice you use to numb the pain of ministry, the loneliness, the heartache? We're looking for like a cocktail recipe. What do you got for us?
Now keep in mind, I'm in the mountains of Virginia. So, if it's not moonshine that's been made in an old gas drum, then that's considered a cocktail here. Okay. Yeah. I've recently become a bourbon guy. For really just stuffing those feelings and numbing the soul crushing pain of life and ministry. Yeah.
Of ministry. Do you have a particular bourbon that you appreciate?
Right now I'm just trying different kinds. So I'm expanding out. I don't really have a go-to.
Dustin has recently gotten into some whiskeys and bourbons. You've been trying that out, haven't you?
I have, yeah. I've been enjoying some Blantons. Blantons is great.
Yeah.
A little more expensive, but
yeah.
Like the Weller. Weller's good. Yeah, I found that ministry had become so painful that beer wasn't enough anymore.
Right.
So I made the jump to bourbon, thinking that might have better effects, and it has overall.
Give you a few moments of peace.
This has gotten dark.
Yeah, we should probably say something about this. Yeah, we are not, as far as I know, none of us are alcoholics.
We've never been tested, but
hey, yeah, I maybe have one drink a month, so I don't know. But actually, I like the Japanese whiskeys. I discovered some of those a while ago.
Isn't that an Ecclesia thing to say? You know what? I've really been leaning into the Japanese whiskeys. That is such an Ecclesia thing to say.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just true.
What else have you noticed about Ecclesia and the culture in Ecclesia? You've been around from the beginning. What are some of the things that you've seen, that you've noticed, that really mark Ecclesia out from other church networks?
I mean, do you just want to press into that for a few minutes?
I do. I want to lean into that question.
You want to lean in? You want to sit with it?
I do. I want to hear a good word.
It really does have a very specific kind of vibe about it. There's if you're coming to an Ecclesia event for the first time, there are some things that are useful to have with you, available to you. French press, coffee, coffee pot, so that you can, grind the beans in the way that you feel like is both ethically appropriate, but also fresh enough to, satisfy your particular caffeine concerns. It's great if you have a moleskin to take notes in. It's preferred if you just kind of live tweet your thoughts. But if you can't do that, which I just can't, then a moleskin would be a perfectly good thing to have. You want to have a good, cool pair of boots. You know, kind of the show, you know, I'm hip, but I need to get around a little bit. The beard, the glasses. I mean, it's nice if you can have the hair thing going, but that's Lord smoking.
That's a more advanced kind of Ecclesia move.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you just got it. You know, it's just like the if you can laugh at a joke. I tell you what, when I really saw, I felt like this is a moment where I see what Ecclesia is. Someone made a joke about Feuerbach, and half the room laughed. Half the room laughed at a joke about this, not obscure, but not and that's when I'm like, okay, Ecclesia, Feuerbach jokes. So those things are helpful to know. We actually, for our staff that come for the first time to Ecclesia things, which each time, you know, there'll be a few that haven't been to anything. We give them kind of a tutorial so that they can at least, you know, be ready for what it is.
Do you really?
Yeah, we do. Because people were like, what? You know, or they just, you know, you know, you kind of want to understand what you're walking into. We, you know, some of it is real stuff, and some of it we're just joking around, you know, but we give a little bit of here's what to expect.
Now, this may be kind of a dangerous area for me, or for us rather, but I've noticed over the years that I've been involved with Ecclesia that the number of women involved has gone up and up as Ecclesia has become known more and more as a place that really champions women in ministry and welcomes them into the network and wants to see them use their gifts and see them platformed. A lot of the things that we're talking about Ecclesia culture might be construed as being kind of more male specific. I'm wondering, what have you guys noticed about the Ecclesia women? I mean, what is it that particularly says these ladies are, you know, what do they bring to the corporate culture of Ecclesia? And again, this might be really dangerous, so I want to be careful, but, you know, I don't want us to get in too much trouble. But, what have you guys noticed? Dustin? Complete silence.
No, I think, certainly when we make the jokes about the culture, I tend to make, you know, male-centric jokes because it's just, it's kind of mocking myself, you know. You know, I think here's what I've seen. Not only, I mean, the obvious is that things have gotten stronger the more female voices that have been brought in. I mean, that's a given. But what's interesting is there's a lot of what I hear in a lot of those voices, and it's either stated specifically or it just feels like it's kind of under the surface. And for a lot of the women, there's been this kind of legacy of pain regarding their gender in ministry. You know, either they were a part of something that wasn't where they weren't allowed to express that, or you know, the way that they expressed it, even if it was a place where they would say, you know, that we appreciate the gifts in both genders, that the expectation on the way that a woman might express it, there were just additional, you know, things that, and so I hear a lot of like that, the story of difficulty in it. And I think that kind of like, it flavors their voice and their perspective. They're things that you learn when you are, you know, we're following a Jesus that you know, that he didn't, you know, elevate himself to the top of the pile. You know, he incarnated in this group of oppressed people, and there's just certain things that is my gender, my color, my, you know, this that I haven't interacted with, and so I think it seasons and it strengthens, I think, these voices that we have. It's been a nice thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed that, you know, this may be an overgeneralization, but it seems to me that Ecclesia is a place where men can come and be weak. Mm-hmm. And it's a place where women can come and be strong and find their strength. You know, because that's one thing that when I think about Ecclesia women, I think, man, these women are they're strong.
Yeah.
These are leaders.
Yeah.
These are women who have something to say. And, you know, I don't know all that's going on in their particular context, but when they're at Ecclesia, it seems like, man, that those gifts, those voices just come alive.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. I think it, you know, there's a, I don't know, there's just a sense of, one thing that I've liked about Ecclesia, and we always make jokes about, you know, we did the, you know, the technology utilizing humble leader thing a number of years ago, where we were really going after the Ecclesia kind of mindset. But that mindset really has changed over the last number of years. It's not just this kind of, you know, theology, you know, fed from the fire hose kind of thing anymore. It's become much more relational, much more connected. And I think that is, you know, at least in part through inviting more of these voices, some that are women, into not just the time itself, but the goal of the thing itself. I feel like the relational network has become a lot more relational. And that is only good. I mean, it just only is. And I don't think that's just because, you know, women are more relational and there's this and that. We can go all, but there's been a shaping of the way that we make the time valuable, and it's just gotten much, much better. And so it's not just a few days for theology wonks anymore. And I think early on there were a few where that really is what it was. Now it's a place where you can come in and you can just hang out and watch Dave Fitch smoke super cheap cigars and just almost offensively cheap cigars. And you know,
seriously, I think he told me once, like, if he's not going to pay more than a couple bucks.
Oh, like, I don't even. When was the last time he paid a couple of bucks for one of those things?
7-Eleven is his preferred distributor.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And but you know, you have this thing where the people that are leaders are not separated. They're not like they're not.
No green room.
There's no green room. And there's no like, you know, I just remember this moment, and it will forever be stuck in my mind with Dallas Willard when he spoke at a national gathering a number of years ago. A few of us were dealing with something from the church that I help pastor. We were dealing with something really difficult. And so we were just, at the end of the day, we were just sitting in the room because people had just basically cleared out, and we were just praying. Just sitting on the floor and praying. And Dallas Willard, you know, 80-some, you know, late 70s, early 80s at this point, had just been done a number of the sessions and had been a part of everything the whole day. And he just sat down with us and he was like, can I just, it sounds like you guys this is difficult. Can I just pray with you? He didn't say, let me solve it. I'm Dallas Willard. You know, he just said, can I just pray with you? I just remember seeing Dallas Willard at the end of a long day at his age, sitting on the floor with us, praying. And that is what Ecclesia is. There is no separation. It's just us with us trying to support each other. And I don't know. That's what it is. That I'll never lose that image.
Yeah, and I can't help but think, Jim, that our workshops have been largely responsible for that change in culture.
Without a question.
Over the years at Ecclesia. Jim, you're an avid reader.
I am.
It's fun to talk with you about books. I worked with a guy for about 12 or 13 years that only seemed to read zombie novels or, you know, lowbrow fantasy stuff. And so I couldn't have the kind of intellectual conversation that I wanted.
Come on.
But you know what, Jim? The thing that strikes me—
layers to the Twilight series. Keep that in mind.
Strikes me is that you are the only person I know personally who has read this book, Charles Taylor, A Secular Age. I bought this at Christmas. I've read 2 pages so far. So I'm making progress. I've read 2 books about this book, but never read this. But you have read this entire thing. It's a huge book, small print.
It is.
But it makes me wonder, as being such an avid reader, are there a couple of books, probably not that one, maybe, are there a couple of books that have been really influential to you in the way that you go about thinking about ministry, that you go about doing pastoral ministry, those books that you'd say to young men and women who are about to enter some kind of pastoral ministry, you need to read these 2 or 3 books?
Oh man, I am always I do so badly with this kind of question. One, because I'm that subcategory of people that read a ton and can never remember titles. I mean, just for the life of me, I cannot remember. Like when I enjoyed A Secular Age, but right as you were bringing it up, it's like, I could not remember if someone said, what was that book that Taylor wrote that, I don't know. It was big, and here's what it goes into. I would say that, that for me, and this is, I mean, well, you ask me, so it's, that's what I think. The things that God had to do with me is he had to temper my need to accomplish and my need to prove to everybody that I was good enough, my need to be seen as valuable. Yeah, so those are some of the deep things that God has had to really work with me on. And, Henry Nouwen just really was someone that he just, oh gosh, here we go. I don't know. Henry Nouwen, great writer. It's like I can picture
In the Name of Jesus?
No.
We'll just start going through them.
Yeah.
Wounded Healer?
Yes. Thank you. In the Name of Jesus was good too. But I mean, really, he's one of those people that really tempered me. I think that, I'm a huge fan of anything by Dallas Willard. Divine Conspiracy is, that just kind of seeing, I don't know, just seeing that helped me see my faith and the way it interacts with culture in a whole different way. I'm a huge fan of Leslie Newbigin. Just imagine coming back from India to Europe and seeing with those eyes, what the Enlightenment had done, what culture, what the scientific industrial revolution done. But, and then drawing people back to this understanding of their faith, their understanding of where they fit in all of this. I mean, I really enjoy him. I loved Mandy Smith's book, The Vulnerable Pastor. That just, again, that's I need things that kind of remind me that it's okay to not be vulnerable. I know that, but I don't know, that God receives me as me, not just for what I accomplish in his name. The End of Evangelicalism by Dave Fitch. Honestly, that's a very meaningful book for me. So it's just kind of all over the map. Yeah.
Those are some good recommendations.
Yeah, those are good. Well, Jim, you're a highly acclaimed author yourself, of a well-read and high-selling book called Should We Fire God? That I know you can find on Amazon, for sure. Local bookstores is questionable, but you actually had an opportunity with that contract. I remember you saying this. You had an open invite to speak at Joel Osteen's church?
Well, it wasn't an open invite, but so my publisher was Faith Words, which is the religious imprint, the writing imprint of Time Warner, their whole thing. And their most profitable author was Joel Osteen. And so I was given, and my agent had a lot of connections with, a lot of places. And so and the publisher also, obviously they had that strong connection. So there was an opportunity for me to potentially go and speak there. It was never it wasn't an open invitation, and it wasn't ever like it never got finalized because I was uncomfortable with the way that what I would say there was how it was going to have to be edited and filtered for content and whatnot. But yeah, I did. I could have done that, and probably it would have helped my sales a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Oh man, your book, Should We Fire God, came out of your experience of the shooting at Virginia Tech, and that just doesn't seem to comport well with the Joel Osteen experience. I mean, maybe I'm not giving him enough credit.
Yeah.
But
well, I think it's like, it feels like, I mean, that was a question I had. It was like, have you read the book? Do you have what I say? And once it's edited for content and clarity and alignment with message and things like that, it just feels like, like the radio version of a lot of rap songs. Like it's just gonna be, bleeped out almost all of it. So I don't, but it never got that far. I just wasn't very comfortable with that. But yeah.
So Jim, we've got a few minutes left in our podcast, and some of my favorite times at Ecclesia have just been swapping stories with you. I would love to hear from you, just as you think back on all the national gatherings, the times we've been together. What are some of the times that really stand out to you as just being, man, that was the funniest thing that ever happened?
The funniest thing. Well, I think, and this may be a little self-serving, but when Dustin and I did the technology utilizing humble leader thing,
which is a great acronym. What does that spell when you?
It's a way for us to say, because it was like how to be a technology utilizing humble leader in ministry through social media.
Yes,
and
how to be a tool.
How to be a tool, right? That was really all we were trying to get around to saying, because we're that mature. But seeing people like throw that hashtag on things was absolutely hysterical, and seeing them apply it, it's funny, but it means something because they applied it correctly. And I thought that was something that just is, and it still is used. You'll see people, hashtag tool. But funny, I remember mind-blowing was N.T. Wright riffing off of Dylan songs.
Oh, yeah.
I thought, I don't know that I can process all this. Or Ben Witherington, like getting up and just constant, a constant stream of puns, and I thought, I've read this guy, he's brilliant, and I would not think, I bet he does a ton of puns. I mean, just like, I was like, what is this? This is just it's a constant stream, and like granddad jokes and all this stuff. I think, oh man, there've been just so many like just small moments, that just are so funny. The time, I can't remember who it was, but they put up a picture of Dave Fitch and Jack Nicholson from The Shining together, and just like, that's who he reminds me, and it's just like,
same guy.
What's that?
It's the same guy.
Yeah, it was just so, it's just all these little things, and as you orbit around it more, and as there's there's just more of those just little things.
Yeah.
Hearing people talk about even how ministry is bad or difficult, hearing, there's just this kind of sharing of these situations that you find yourselves in, and the jokes about, how do you learn how to just not show it on your face, when you're hearing something, or how do you, it can be difficult even when it's great. Ministry is great and difficult and all of that, and just swapping stories. It is so funny, and it's so like it I don't know, it just helps. You see other people are walking through the same stuff, and I don't know, but I'd be hard pressed to think of something that was funnier than N.T. Wright with a guitar doing Dylan song parodies.
I think for me, and this will probably be the first time I publicly acknowledge this, but for 4 to 5 years, Todd Heathstand, who was at that time pastoring the Well in what was the name of that goofy little suburb he was in outside of Philly? Feasterville. Feasterville. Yeah. We ran this scam on Dave Fitch, where we had a fake Dave Fitch account on Twitter that was just basically.
I remember that.
And it drove him absolutely nuts trying to figure out who was behind this.
Man.
The awesome thing was because we tag teamed this, I could be standing in front of him while Todd would tweet something off this account, and it would throw him off, and then Todd could come into the room, and I'd go away and tweet something, and we had fake Fitch going for so long, and it was so good, and just, nobody else read it. Nobody but us three, like Matt Tebby, but Fitch was tuned in, and Fitch it drove him nuts. Dustin has got your Dallas Willard story was great and touching. Dustin had an encounter with Willard that was probably equally touching, but not in quite the same way.
Yeah, my Willard experience was unexpected. We came into the early leaders gathering that first morning that we had just arrived from Portland late the night before. So it was 7 a.m. East Coast time, 4 a.m. our time. And so Bob and I drug in there, felt terrible. The only seat left in the circle was next to Dallas Willard. And so I'm like, oh, geez. So we sit down, and I try to make some small talk with Dallas Willard. Dallas Willard wasn't a big small talk guy.
But he was your hero, man. You quote Willard in almost every sermon.
Yeah.
I know, it's gotten out of hand. Willard and Seinfeld, those come up often in sermons. But so I sat down next to him. I tried to make some small talk. I said, oh, did you just get in last night? Because he was living in California at the time, I believe. And he said, yes. Oh, okay. How are you feeling? Because I'm
You asked him a question. He answered the question.
Because I'm feeling pretty wiped out. He's like, I feel fine. Like, and so then I see him. He's kind of like he's turning something over in his head, and he's contemplating whether to share it with me or not. Mm-hmm. And so he kind of hesitates, and then he's like, okay. And then he leans over in a very grandfatherly way. He says, let me tell you something. And I was like, oh, okay. He said, there used to be a time when I experienced jet lag horribly. He said, I remember a flight to South Africa once where they practically had to scrape me off the plane. And I knew that was no way to live my life. And I heard the Lord say very clearly to me in that moment, Dallas, they're on first name basis.
Right, sure.
Dallas, anytime you fly over 3 hours, I want you to fast and to pray and to memorize scripture. And if you do those things, then I will sustain you. And so every flight I've had 3 hours or more, I have fasted, I've prayed, and I've memorized scripture. And the Lord has always sustained me. So to answer your question, I feel great this morning. And I'm blown away. My 4 a.m. mind can't handle something like this.
You did none of those things.
No, I felt like an inch tall in the presence of this guy. And so the rest of the morning as he's talking, this was the real deal. This is the guy that said he'd never go to a church that didn't have a strong scripture memorization program. I'm like, who has one of those? But anyway, so I felt like an inch tall. But then listening to him the rest of the day, there was such a weightiness to anything he said. And maybe you felt this too. But he could say something as simple as, Jesus is Lord. And I'd be like, wow, yeah, that's amazing.
Wow.
But yeah, he had that, gravity to him as a person because he was such an authentic human being that was, clearly communing with God. in a very intimate way. So that story, I'll never forget it. I've probably told it a million times. I still remember it very clearly. That was a memorable Ecclesia moment.
If you could have just looked at him after he said that and just said, Dallas, on my flight, I watched Batman Returns. And then just I think that's the way you respond to that. You know what I did? I streamed Netflix.
There was an Eddie Murphy movie, and I hadn't seen it in 3 years. So,
Daddy Daycare too. I just wanted to see what more of the story can they tell. I had to know. So, yep. That's fair.
Oh my goodness. Well, this has been a great talk. Jim, I want to ask you one last question as we go, and I know Dustin's going to be particularly interested in this one. You have made the decision to kind of move on from your ministry, and I'm wondering
why am I going to be particularly interested?
I'm wondering, how did you know? Like, what? And this is something that we deal with a lot in church planting and wanting to encourage people, don't leave before it's time, and don't overstay your welcome. Know when is the right season, when the church has grown beyond you, when you need to hand it off. How did you know? I mean, what was it? Take us through, briefly the process of you thinking that through, praying it through, talking to people. What was that like for you?
Briefly. I like how you just dropped that in, just briefly. Hit the high notes on this. I had been wondering, I'm very happy here. And so it wasn't, wanting to leave or anything like that. But I remember in a sabbatical, probably 8 or 9, I don't remember how many years ago it was. It's somewhere around in there. I'd been asking God, how would I know when you want me to leave? Because I felt like, again, God called me to ministry and he called me here. Mine was a little more of a specific kind of thing. So I've been offered other things in the past, but it's like, well, no, I haven't been released. So how would I know if I'm released? Or how would I know when you want me to leave? And so that's just been something that's just kind of cracking around in the back of my brain. And I pray about it sometimes and don't other times. And he gave me kind of a vision, an image of a particular room when we're walking our small group leaders through some things. And it's actually the room I'm in now. And it just this image of it being filled with these leaders of these small groups, just trying to do kind of this kingdom work where they are. And there was a point at which I saw that. I saw the room filled. When we started, very much was not, but it was. And then I was just driving back from somewhere, and I felt like God just kind of, when he speaks to me, it sounds weird, but it's like, it almost feels like it's a thought that comes from like behind the right side of my head, and it just kind of goes right in. It's a thought, but there's almost this feeling with it. It's not a physical, I don't know. It's just weird, but it's like, there's a certain thing that kind of goes with these thoughts that God gives me sometimes. And it was 4 years. In 4 years, I want you to go. You have the people now that can do the things that you do, and they're going to be the ones that are going to take it beyond where you will or where you have, or I'm 47 years old, and it's always there's always that rule, you only really reach people that are 10 years older or younger than you. That's kind of the classic rule. That's just not true, but there is some reality to the fact that there's distinctiveness there.
Yeah, generally speaking,
and so we have some of these younger people that really can do it and would do it extremely well, and so it just kind of evolved from there. So then I remember I called my wife. I was still on the road, and kind of ran it by her. I called Chris Backert. He's still a very good friend, and then we started talking with a few people that are here locally, and we just started kind of praying over it to see, is there anything to this? Is this just me or not? And as we kind of realized that there was more to it, then it became this plan. So yeah, it was little pieces kind of scattered throughout. A lot of praying just about it and then not praying about it. And then a couple of moments where the Spirit just kind of, just did something that was confirmed in the community around me. So that's it.
Very
Briefly.
cool. Very cool. You know what really stuck out to me in that? Multiple times during those years, people reached out to you and offered you something else.
Mhm.
That never happened to me. Like not once in almost 15 years, having planted my own church, raising up leaders, doing the thing, and nobody wanted Bob. So Jim, you must have been doing something right.
That's the only assumption I can arrive at. The only one. Yep. That and my rugged good looks.
Yeah, okay. Yes, you are ruggedly handsome. Yes.
Thank you. It's nice to hear every now and then. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, hey, this has been a great conversation. Jim, you are just one of my favorite people in Ecclesia to talk to, and I'm so glad that you made the time to sit down and talk with us for this kind of our inaugural rebooting of the Ecclesia podcast. Dustin, anything you want to add there?
No, thanks for being with us, Jim. You're definitely, in the top 10, 15 people that I really like and relate with at Ecclesia. So thanks for being on with us.
Jim, anything nice you want to say about us?
I would just like to let you guys know that before any podcast I'm on, I fast, I pray, and I memorize scripture. And it allows me to do them as well as I do. And I'm not suggesting that you guys should do that so that you could maybe do your part a little bit better. But if you take it in that direction, I'm just not going to fight it. I'm not going to fight it. So just keep that in mind, gentlemen.
That's a good word.
That is a good word.
I know, guys. This was so much fun.
Call the podcast is a good word with Dustin.
Guys, this really was fun. I the joking aside, you guys, I'm just so grateful for knowing you, and it was an honor that you asked. And I don't, I think most of this probably can make it through to the final edit.
I'm too lazy to edit, so it's all going on.
I might care, but I just don't. Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this hour or so on the Ecclesia podcast. Just a reminder that the Ecclesia National Gathering is coming up. It's a time when we gather together as a network. It's kind of a family reunion time. So if you don't already have plans to be there, if you're within driving distance, it's still a feasible thing. If you need to book a plane ticket, might be a little bit too late, but we would love to see you there, especially for the Ecclesia dinner on Friday evening at this year's Awakenings gathering around for Missio Alliance. So thank you. Please make sure to check out the resources we have at ecclesianet.org, and we will see you again next month. Thanks, guys.